What does it take to ruin a character archetype for someone? In a previous video, I did share a bit about my thoughts on archetypes as well as a few other trends, and it should be linked somewhere in this video or in the description below if you want to watch a bit for more context. But for a basic description that might even be better than the one I had in the previous video, when I'm talking about archetypes, it's basically a pattern the character follows or their role in the story. Think of like the hero or heroine, the love interest, the mentor or the villain. All these things are archetypes that kind of show a specific role the character is playing, and them even be different items that kind of fulfill a different sort of archetype on each of those, or niche in a sense. But it's basically something that can't really be traced as being originated from a specific character, like I would consider an XP or alternate being. And now that I've established where I'm coming from, let's dive in. One key point to remember with all this, though, is that everyone has their own likes and preferences. So what could be considered an unforgivable sin by one person can be considered a character quirk by another. Which is why just because someone would base something off of a popular archetype does not mean it will be an automatic success. They could have a strong base to build off of, and even an audience that is potentially ready for that kind of character, but if they bundle the execution in making the character stand out, then they could fail. And it's also depending on whether the audience will accept them. And even then, people can have different breaking points. Again, the kind of thing to think of these things is that it's always about the audience with storytelling. It's not just, oh, I'll write it and then they're accepted. Sure, if you're a big name and people love you, then they might, but if you're not, then people will probably judge based on the quality of your work. I mean, there's kind of the saying, you can be so popular that some people will accept whatever you put out, but then if you're not, then people will rate you on the quality rather than who you are, in a sense. I think that's what I'm saying, yeah. And again, for example, on how the audience would accept them, if you introduce a character for an episode who annoys some of the audience, but since it's just for the episode, most people aren't going to just drop the show and never come back. But if you then add that character to the main cast without potentially a way for them to develop out or add nuance to the phase they're in of annoying the audience, then people may start to consider giving up on the show. And then finally, if said character starts to then hog the spotlight from everyone else, then yeah, you've probably ruined the show for the audience you had. And maybe you picked up a different audience, but sometimes the new audience is not as good as the old one. So onto the archetype I feel that I'm just tired of seeing and why I think that it is I am, and also what I would do to fix it. Or at least give other options. Although I'm not exactly sure what to call it, but it's the duo that's not a duo. And there's probably different ways to call it depending on what it is. And this is also probably more how it's portrayed in games that I don't really like. But you have one character, often a child, who is connected to another. And the another one is often some sort of other, like non-human or outside of the current scope of society or however you want to see it. But they're put in the realm of protector and guardian. So far, so good. There's nothing that's really objectionable here, except in the rest of the tasks that's there. Now here's the thing, we as humans tend to relate to humans, so in many stories, even though set in sci-fi or fantasy worlds, there will be humans in abundance. And from a development standpoint, it's also a lot easier to develop characters that are near human for a large task. Yet, if you're going to have these different beings in the universe, why not have them join the party, even as just a token? Thus comes one with a reason to, that being the Protectorate. Except said duo may actually focus more on the person being protected than the actual protector, even though when it comes to usefulness, it's a protector by the long shot. But most of the conversation and development are based on or filtered by the other one's view of the world. It's like you have one character with two forms rather than a natural duo. Which again for relatability makes some sense, even if I don't like it. But it was when I encountered one of those pairs where the kid being protected was the brat, and the protector clearly must have had the patience of the saint to keep putting up with her. Now, there probably was a reason for this, but to have it pretty much be almost consistently over time with little change just rubs me the wrong way, especially when the focus is then on the brat rather than the sweethearted protector, who is also far more useful in general, but hampered in interactions because of said brat. Again, they were a kid, so maybe it is justified with what they've had to deal with, but it also brings all the problems of the archetype to the forefront. Namely that beyond just having characters who are linked, and I talked about that in my kind of one on love and romance, but you can have these characters so joined at the hip that they are both stuck because one refuses to grow and pretty much wastes the other's potential for stories because they also end up hogging the spotlight. Of course, this isn't to say those types are all bad characters, just that I think the potential for me to dislike them is higher. But I want to be someone who at least offers ideas with criticisms rather than just being a complainer. So how about I share 3 ideas for how to make these kind of non-duo duos better. The first of which is balance, making sure both characters are established as both their own character as well as being a unit, and both should have some way of contributing equally and being willing to. Now in story-heavy mediums, this can be accomplished by giving the protectorate a non-combative skill set, like they could be a lockpicker or a hacker, while their protector deals with the fighting. And somewhere where gameplay is key, then making it so that one is also maybe providing a support or healing skills while the other fights to work. Or we could even go a step farther and have them as synergized characters that are designed to work well with each other, like their skills play off each other, or they're filling the role the other one needs to survive so they can be specialists. But they are each their own character rather than just having to be this duo all the time. The second is to flip it. If the focus is always on the protectorate, then why not do something different? And show why someone will want to protect them and what their motivations are. Like, it's kind of a thing of you can make someone who's just seen humanity in a whole new light just because of their forced to be in this protective role or so forth. And again, they're also basically the guardian of a child oftentimes. So then you have this whole host of worries and joys for them to experience while letting the kid be a kid. And also what their motivations are. Do they want to, is it just for this person, or are they kind of understanding humanity and what's it like to be human or so forth? There's so much realm of context for that in just shifting the perspective of who's the focus. And then the third one is rather simple. Be bold, ditch the human. This goes back to what I said about relatability, but a well-written character does not need to let anything lead us to be relatable. Or do I need to point back to years of movies featuring cartoon animals, aliens, and robots that have been making bank? This is about fiction after all, and the ability to explore different perspectives from our own is one of its greatest strengths. So don't waste it, embrace it. All you really have to do is give them a trait or a goal that people can understand or sympathize with. And things like to grow, to have identity, to have purpose, to live an impact, to be loved. These are things most people understand, and only the tip of the iceberg of what can make a character relatable. At least those are my ideas for solving my issues with that particular character archetype. But what do you think, my friend? Do I have a point, or do you actually love those kinds of characters and they can do no wrong? Feel free to let me know in the comments below, and if you like this video, feel free to share it with someone you feel will like it as well. Anyway, I'm Jonah. You've been watching Lionsmane Media, where we celebrate stories in all the different ways to tell them as well as what they teach us. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.